Sahanavavatu, Sahanau Bhunaktu, Saha Viryam Karavavahai, Tejasvinavaditam Astama Vidvishavai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great energy. May our study be illumined. And may we not unnecessarily argue with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So this is the evening, Wednesday evening, once more. Question and answer. Spiritual seekers. I suppose we're all spiritual seekers, whether we know it or not. So, as usual, I can mute my microphone so that you may bring out yours and bring out your questions along with it.
Swami, could you comment on what I'm going to read an extract from the Gospel, and if you could make a comment on it. This is Ramakrishna speaking. The disciple is said to be the discipline is said to be rightly followed only when one plunges in. What will a man gain by merely reasoning about the words of the scriptures? The fools. They reason themselves to death over information about the path. They never take the plunge. What a pity. So that's the quote. But sort of what in respect of a Western devotee, we start a bit further back, since we're not brought up in an Indian, with the same background that somebody in India would be brought up. So, like, how does a Westerner get the right proportion between? You have to know something. In order to have a practice, you have to understand something about the practice. So you have to read something. But where's the balance where the reading should be stopped on the bhakti path? Maybe that's not a good question, but anyway.
No, it's a good question. It's a good question. So I think there's an era when we divide things into East and West and North and South. I don't know if I'm a Westerner. I was born in the South. Maybe I'm a Southerner. And you lot are all Northerners. You see, yeah. When we make these kind of distinctions, I think we're forgetting a few things.
Sorry, could I just... maybe I expressed it badly, but what I mean is that there's a certain knowledge to Sanatana Dharma. And if you're born in the West, you weren't brought up with that in that milieu. You don't have that knowledge. That's just a fact. I'm not expressing an opinion there. I feel I'm expressing a fact. So it's not this. So somebody that's born in that milieu is on a different level to somebody who isn't. Yeah. Just on in terms of factual knowledge. I just think that's.
Yes, I still think it's an error, because if you go to Mexico, you'll find a wealth of spiritual sentiment and practice and devotion. If you go to Portugal, if you go to Spain, if you go to if you go to Poland, for example, if you are here in Ireland many generations ago. So you see devotion. We can't say that one type of devotion is correct and the other type not. That's not how we think, because Vedanta says that there's only one entity flowing through everything, and even the everything is that one. We don't have to look for grace. It's already flowing, and it's flowing in abundance. And the only thing in the way is your personality. Take yourself away from your personality and you will access abundant grace everywhere. So we're talking about grace. And when we do it from that point of view, we're really not talking about study, reasoning, or prayer life or philosophy or any of these things, you see. And Ramakrishna's message is universal. It's for everyone. He's not just speaking to a particular section of people. And your question is, well, maybe it's more difficult for Western people because they haven't been brought up with the abundance of devotion. I know what you mean. Because on every street corner in India, there'll be maybe a small shrine. And then in South India, there are these magnificent temples. People in South India are much more temple orientated than. So people are brought up with that. But I can say equally that people are brought up with pictures of the cross or Jesus or Mary or the saints or all of these holy entities in their households. And I can speak from personal experience because that was what my childhood household was like. It was exactly like that. And so there was an immediate movement, internal movement towards devotion. Now, there are, of course, different perspectives. There's no doubt. So at the coarsest level, the understanding may be that I am here and there's an extra cosmic God elsewhere. That would be common east and west. It's the same position in India as anywhere else. When somebody is in trouble, they pray in their own way to get some kind of result. And people in the West do the same thing, and it's the same error. Not that it's a serious error, it's just that it is based on a wrong idea and misunderstanding. And it's not actually plunging in, it's standing on the periphery. Ramakrishna's point is beautiful. You see, if you're standing by the ocean, there are some people who say, oh, I have seen the ocean. All right, what is it, what is it like when you take the water up in your hands? Oh, I never went that far. What is the temperature of it? I read it's 13, 14 degrees. No. Did you dip your toes in? Did you dip your foot in? Then did you go for a swim? Then did you plunge deep inside? Then did you frolic? Did you enjoy the ocean? Did you get your bliss from it? So this is so for everybody. And in every religion, mainstream religion that is still extant today, you'll find people of the highest mystical and spiritual and internal character that got this, that plunged deeply in. Catherine of Siena, John of the Cross, Francis of Assisi, we can name hundreds of them. Padre Pio. Padre Pio is a very, very well-known saint here in Ireland. More or less every household has a picture, as you know, or you go to a church, you'll see Padre Pio's, and he is a contemporary saint. And these saints, what was the difference between them and us? Well, those saints plunged in. And that means commitment. They committed themselves. But you cannot read while swimming. I don't know if you ever tried it. Studying a text and swimming at the same time. Floating, you might be able to do it a little bit. It's okay. But sooner or later, either the book will get wet or you'll have to put it down. So these two things are incompatible. Never mind about plunging. You will get your whole book wet. And so when we highlight reasoning as the main criteria, the main practice within spirituality, this is a wrong formula. And it's an unscientific formula too. But it is an argument that is used against religion because religion, belief, and faith are now put into one category by many people in Western countries. And that's caught on in the East as well. But this is, if you talk of Western, there's an Occidental trend toward that. And there's no doubt that historically, there is a trend in the West more toward materialism. But in India, for example, there will be more of a trend toward collectivism. In the West, it's more individual orientated, but none of these are impediments. So we take what we have and we use it. And the main thing, the main formula for everybody is to take away East and West and all these other distinctions. We put in the subject of grace. There's a whole aspect to our life which makes us live and move and breathe, and we call it grace. It is a thing which is already around us. It is like water. You know, when you plunge into water and dive in, then you get a whole stream that goes behind you. And it's exactly the same thing when we talk about grace. There's a current that is always flowing. When we plunge into it, then it leaves a streamline behind us. And that streamline then fills in all the other gaps, and so-called difficulties disappear. They are dealt with nicely. So maybe it's a good idea to talk about grace. So I'll give you some ideas. I once asked somebody, do you know about Grace? And they said, oh, yes, but I believe she passed away last Thursday. So it happens to be the name of somebody also. Never mind. What is grace? You see, grace makes us get what we want, whatever it is. For good or bad, grace does it. It's not we who are working and making rituals and doing devotional movements. So therefore, grace comes first, and then action comes. It's not action comes first and then grace comes. The medium, you can say, in which we are floating, using the analogy of water, is divine grace. And so this divine exists within us in the shape of the soul. It's never outside. That is the fundamental mistake of beginners in spiritual life or religious life. And it is common both, whether it is East, whether it is West, that there is a designated power that stands outside yourself. And this you'll find regardless of region. It's not a regional thing. It's a human thing. Now, you know, there's a most extraordinary series of discoveries. We can call it a third way of evolution. What is the second way? Well, the first way is Darwin's evolution. Let's call it that. Let's talk about some modern biology. The second way would be what's called neo-Darwin, neo-Darwinism, to which Charles Darwin would not really have subscribed. And yet that's the modern contemporary trend in understanding what is evolution. And what it means is all power is in the genome. Now research, very careful and good research, has said that's not the case. There's no such thing as a selfish gene. Selfishness is something that you and I impose on something. There can be nothing selfish about something that is organic. But there is great intelligence. The chances of the genome sequencing being disrupted by chance, just that much, is extraordinary. It's about 1 in 100,000 or something like that. And even when a copying mistake is done, the whole organism rallies round. And it's as if the DNA is asking for a solution and the whole of the organism is supplying it. Not only that, but shaping an inheritance from it. Now, there's something called the Weismann barrier. I won't bore you with all those details, except to say, somehow there's a rule that says nothing in the genome can be passed on. Or if it's passed on just for a few generations or one generation, but not permanently. And so we're left with chance, random mutation, and there's no doubt randomness in the cell, but the cell is remarkably astute at rectifying any anomalies and taking advantage creatively of a stochastic event, stochastic, a kind of chance thing that's going on, so that it is actually the cells that make order or that make order from chaos. And that's the remarkable thing. It goes all against the laws of nature, but nature itself is running the show. And it's a remarkably intelligent. And this is just new discoveries, really. If you extract the DNA from the cell and put it in a petri dish, it can remain there for 1,000 years and nothing will happen. It won't do anything. It requires the whole cooperation of the cell, working in a very dynamic way. There's a lot of talk these days about artificial intelligence. Supposing you develop a robot which simulates a human, even in the way it looks, then you have a conversation with it. You may discover after a while there's a remarkable difference, because the artificial intelligence, the robot, has no purpose. It's not going anywhere. And it knows, if it knows anything, that it's made from silicon molecules which don't go anywhere, as opposed to human molecules, which are water molecules and are in a constant state of flux. They're always animated. They're always doing a Brownian motion thing. They're always finding new creative ways. They're always busy looking for new avenues, new routes. Just a remarkable thing. So the point of my saying all that is that this supreme mover, this supreme intelligence, is never outside. It is always within us. It's always inside us. And so this plunging is an inner spiritual experience. And so as God sees me as a worthy instrument, say, where he can invest his grace, then we can see how we look now and now and now and now, because God finds me very good and you very good, all of us very good, and doesn't classify it as this or that. And there's an inner urge, creative urge within every species, you might say, but let's stick to humans, because they have more than anybody else or anything else the possibility of manifesting this divinity from within, in Swami Vivekananda's language. See, if God didn't find me good, then he wouldn't sustain me anymore. He wouldn't continue pumping my heart, digesting my food, and making this remarkable activity called cellular activity, organic activity within me and you and everyone, firing off neurological synapses at rapid rates. This wouldn't happen at all. And so what we call divine grace, it falls freely on this vehicle, that vehicle, all the vehicles, as conscious as the conscious and subconscious levels. And these are levels of the mind, but of course for God there are no levels. For him there's no conscious, there's no unconscious. It's one single sheet. Past, present, future exists for you and me. We can register it, but never for God. So, when an airplane plunges through the air is a good example. What happens? The air closes in behind the wings, and the space vacated. So if I plunge directly into God's grace, and now I'm introducing some words there in Ramakrishna's statement. So if I'm going to plunge into that, then what I'll find is this divine grace will flow in behind me. So where there's a discord, I won't try to correct anything, because grace follows into the area that I left. Everybody has a diving spring or a divine spring. See, you're not going to get grace, you're already in it. And as water closes in behind a person who's, let's say, diving into a swimming pool or plunging in, then and diving forward, then the waves close in behind you. So you're not a bird in a cage wanting freedom. You're the master of the rod, which we call attention. And it is you that command everything, just as it is the organism that commands everything. And what commands the organism? It is you, your own free will. And when you say you, it's really a convenience term. It's really meaning that you have the directional apparatus, the attention, that is capable of tuning in and accessing this divine grace to flow. And when you plunge into it, then that's reward. Now you know spiritual life has started. It has nothing to do with books, and it has nothing to do with reasoning. It is all to do with only one simple understanding. Divine grace is all around. I don't have to look for it. I don't have to pray for it. It's already here. It's already with you. As soon as you turn the rod away from the personality, this grace rushes forward. You can try to understand that. So from the wisest prophets in the remotest past to the remotest future, regardless of whether they sit in Spain, as the Spanish mystics have done, or Italy, or Ireland, where in ancient days, let's say 5th, 6th century, there were remarkable saints who plunged in and made that commitment. And so all the wisdom is now present in this mind, which is God's mind. It's not absent. Whatever you want, that's what makes God omniscient. We just have to tap the power. And that grace is ready to come every instant, like tapping honey from a bee's nest. So every moment of the eternal time is an opportunity for this grace to flow. And that is what is meant by plunging in. We won't do it by thinking about it. Will you go for a swim? Let me think about it. Next day, did you go for your swim? I thought about it. Next day, I thought about it. Next day, don't give me the answer. I know the answer already. Why don't you go and swim? So invoking God's grace in the right way, if we do that, fear is replaced by faith. That's how we do it. And not by fearing or fighting the darkness around us, not doing that. And not trying to correct situations or things, because inherent in that will be an assumption that God has made many mistakes. And you're putting them all right. So you use wisdom, you don't use foolishness. That's the difference. And at the same time, on a physical level, you're tuning into health, not disease. When God's will is invoked, then health and wisdom will be yours. Absolutely, certainly. If you cultivate an awareness of your life in God, where you plunge into His being and plunge into His grace, His, her, its grace, let's not be gender sensitive. Fear is faith in the adversary. Doubt in God, or in at least my confidence or my faith that God protects me. When I have that I'm protected by the divine, that I'm resourced by the divine, that all my solutions lie in the divine, that all my power lies in the divine, that even the rational thinking, the energy for it, is that same divine grace moving, mobilizing me forward. It has nothing to do with me. So we have to shift our understanding more toward that. We have to know that God is not actually inside us, but we are already inside Him. The Lord Gita makes that clear. I'm not in, you're in me, and so it goes on like that. We can switch that around as well, because there's no inside and outside from the divine's point of view. So every move we make is made inside His grace. We are swimming in the great ocean of divine grace. So the opposite movement in His grace must come whatever medium we are in. And if I try to hit you, you'll hit me too, even mentally. And if I try to touch you, you'll try to touch me. The medium is what you expect the medium to be. So get into the right medium, God. Plunge into it. That's the meaning. Don't block God's grace by complaining or lamenting or grumbling or saying, what a pity. That's blocking the grace. Grace is there, but it can't get through if these blocks are erected. God's light is really remarkably reflected in the human experience. It looks like your body. It looks like your mind. It looks like my mind. But when I see God in everyone, I won't be able to do the bad deed I intended to do. It's not possible. So to the extent that impurities are erased more and more, God's grace comes through. The more that purity comes. And as with a screen, when a small hole is made bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, then the view, of course, gets enlarged. If I remove the whole screen, then the view is unlimited. See, the divine exists right here and now. The problem with using rationale and study is there's an assumption something is to get in the future. It's not tuning into what is here now. Someday I'll see the ocean. Someday I'll look at it. Someday I may take a swim in it. Well, that's far removed from actuality. So to the extent that impurities are erased more and more, we get more and more of the divine grace flowing because this God exists here and now and is revealed to us in all these intermediate vibrations that we call life. And they appear as non-God to our eyes. It's only due to our own ignorance that we registered everything as non-God, and we have to get to the God, the reality, somewhere. Because we don't see his grace. We don't see it all around us. Like a fish, when we swim in water, the fish will say, what water? I don't know anything about water. You think water is something? Oh, did I miss something? Did I have to go to a fish supermarket and purchase some water, bottled water? The medium in which you swim, you don't know anything about, but that is divine grace. And the purpose for this, the purpose for which you are made, becomes clear to you as time goes on. You take yourself out of the way. When you take yourself out of the way, grace flows in and your purpose gets revealed. You put God on the line and be a channel for divine grace to flow. So in attachment or passion, if they remain balanced, then divine grace will flow through you and you'll get what you want regardless. Without effort, it will come. The planning entity in you is taken from the infinite tank. That infinite tank is what we call God's grace. It's ever flowing. So we have to plunge in if we're serious about it. We want to get to the root of everything. Plunge in. Reasoning, not much use for it. It's like you see it's like Ramakrishna's only example. See, the tasting of the mangoes. Scholars go to a mango tree, have a big discussion. They start counting the leaves, how many leaves, studying the structure, studying all the mechanism of the tree's growth, how it is able, by capillary action, to take up moisture and distribute it, and all of that is studied. All right. We put it in a book somewhere, students can study it. But when they look around to find out their fourth companion for his contribution to the discussion, they can't find him. He was much wiser. He was sitting in the tree, eating the mangoes with all the juice dripping down with full measure of enjoyment. And you know, if you eat a mango, it has to be supremely noisy. It has to be, you know, an experience. You plunge into the mango also, you see. So Ramakrishna's moral of the story is, don't count leaves, rather eat the mangoes. So I don't know if Westerners and Easterners have advantages, disadvantages, and what have you, because divine grace is always there. And that divine grace itself is neither advantageous or otherwise. It's there. Swim in it. That's all. And we put obstacles by thinking that we have to be dependent on rational or intellectual understanding or any of these things, or ritualism. And actually, none of these are in the category of what is called paravidya, higher knowledge. I knew a person once, you know, who was very, very knowledgeable. He was like an encyclopedia. And in going to a country, he would tell me exactly everything there was to know about the country. He would tell me where to get taxi cabs. He would tell me what the streets were, what to avoid in a city, what cultural places to visit. A very prestigious memory. But then I said, okay, and have you ever been there? No, never been there. It's just encyclopedic knowledge. That means the real experience is denied to him, because all the senses operate when you experience something. You go to a foreign place, you can hear the traffic noise, you can hear the language being used, you can feel the motion of the legs as you walk, you can feel the temperature, you can feel the quality of the air, you can see the sights at a distance and close by, you can smell the aroma of food cooking on the side. All these are denied from the person who gets all his knowledge at a distance in an abstract way. It's not necessary. Get rid of it. It's a blocking mechanism for you. Go and swim. No, let me read this book first on how to swim. It's a bit like that, you see. Before you swim, do all the Google search you like on it. Read every book you can think of on it. And unfortunately, while you're doing that, the tide has gone out. Swimming is no longer available. Now, that's a bad analogy, of course, because the grace is always there. But the analogy is good because it's a metaphor, because it means that the longer you delay, the more distance you put between this real experience. And you see, you get intellectuals everywhere. You get intellectuals. One of the difficulties historically was too much dialectics and philosophy in India. And fortunately, there was a great renaissance. In every great religion, there is a reformation, which has a useful effect. And it was in the, let's say, the 12th and 13th, maybe the 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th centuries in India, where this devotional movement took place. It took place with devotees of Vishnu, it took place with devotees of Shiva. And these are great saints that are celebrated, the Alvas for the Vaishnavites and so on. And revived, mobilized the heart. At that point, it was necessary. But in either case, it required complete plunging, an extreme value, what we might call a magnificent obsession. Everybody should have a magnificent obsession and dive straight into it. So plunge into it. What is stopping you? Well, a couple of possibilities. Firstly, it could be lack of faith. Secondly, equivalent to that could be fear. I don't know. If I plunge in, will I lose myself? And the great saint, Sufi saint Rumi, had this to say. He says this beautiful poem, Lose Yourself is the title of the poem. So you lose yourself when you plunge in. You'll never be the same again. And that is why you see the analogy of water is used and the symbolism of water is used. And that is why Jesus gets baptized by John the Baptizer. It's a symbolism which says, okay, you plunge into the water, you'll feel physically cleansed and mentally renewed. And the symbolism, the impact of it is, okay, I'm now pure again. So again, you see, when we say East and West, I often think if you're sitting in Japan, where's East and where's West? Well, East is America, clearly. You know. See, there's a great emphasis on evidential reasoning. And you'll find today in Western countries, this great propensity for, which is going away now, but with arguing. And it comes to mind, of course, a man called Richard Dawkins, who is really the champion and expert on this neo-Darwinism, which is really contrary to what I've just told you about the beauty, intelligence, and sophistication and subtleness and complexity of an organic cell, including those in your human body. And while some of the principles are useful, by and large, unfortunately, they're not true any longer. So it was valid in the 1970s, is no longer valid, and tells us some important things. Firstly, if you use your reasoning and take it to the nth degree so that you become a reductionist and materialist to boot, then I don't think you'll get to the fundamental reality of life at all, because you've positive reasoning over experience. If somebody says, you see, I believe in the kingdom of heaven within, and the skeptic says, well, that's all airy-fairy talk, it has no meaning to me, because I view everything has to have evidence. And is there evidence for this? Is there evidence for a God? Of course there's evidence, experiential evidence. One person having done it, many people can do it. You and I can do it. We have all the equipment to do it. It requires a level of will and mobilizing the equipment that you have and intensifying your efforts marginally on a daily basis. That's all that's required. But what is the process? The process is using your spiritual instinct, your spiritual inspiration, your inward movement of self-discovery, the inward mystic journey. That's the avenue that you take. It's not evidence that you see outside. It's not putting the God in a test tube to see whether he's acid or alkaline. Not that kind of thing. If it were like that, it wouldn't be a God. So the Kena Upanishad puts it so beautifully, you see. In the eye of the eye, the ear of the ear. When you think the ear is the ultimate extent of the organ of your knowledge, the hearing side of it, he says, no. Behind it is the ear of the ear. Something is listening to the agency of the ear. And the eye of the eye, the mind of the mind, like that. Always going inward. It's not in the outward journey. And reasoning will take you outward. Now, should we have blind faith? Maybe a follow-up question. Should we simply believe and just plunge into the unknown? No. If you need to be convinced, then you have to apply a measure of reasoning. And the measure of reasoning is taken up by the metaphysics, by the philosophy, which gradually leads the mind in a persuasive way, but it won't have anything to do with plunging. It will lead you to, this is why I should swim. No, go and swim. Supposing on a hot day, you see everybody is swimming, and you're so hot on the sand, you want to go in and give the body a reprieve from the heat and enjoy the coolness of the water, then go and do it. And if that's the reason for doing it, then do it. But it's only there as a method, as an indicator, as a signpost. Please go this way. Please go this way. Please go this way. That's all. Beyond that, it has no use and has to be abandoned because you won't get it. It's not sought. It's not gotten through the intellect. Not got by much reasoning. Not got by much study of scripture. Not got by many rituals or anything. In fact, and here comes divine grace coming in, you see. Only that the self chooses. So it means then that God's grace is ever flowing. In Ramakrishna's language, which is all familiar to you all, that the wind of God's grace is ever blowing. We have just to set our sail. And set our sail means an opening. And then allowing ourselves to be carried. That is called faith. So to some extent, to that extent, by understanding the principles and making them rational, that's one thing. But what about those people who don't apply that at all? Are these not the best of our saints and mystics? Who simply said, all right, I have faith, you told me this is true, that's enough for me, let me go and swim now. No, wait, there's an ocean, and here's how the hydrodynamics works, and so on and so forth. No, I don't want to listen to that. Let me go and swim, please. So experiential knowledge is best. There was one man who was testing out the MRI scanning process, and the amount of the wave band or the intensity that he was using, everybody said, that'll kill you. And he knew it wasn't true. He'd done his science. And so he said, I'll do it myself. I'll put myself in the machine. Now that man is still alive. And now this brain scanning is used everywhere. This MRI brain scan, which everybody was so afraid of using. But so convinced was he, himself went and did it. Now, whatever you may think, up or down, wise or otherwise, about Napoleon certainly was a military genius, there's no doubt, regardless of whatever anybody else may think about anything else about him. There's no doubt he had a military genius in him. But you see, he didn't just plan it and issue the orders. He himself manned the cannons. He earned himself the admiration and the nickname of Little Corporal because he was prepared. He had so much faith that he said, this is how you do it. I'll show you. Come on. And he pitches in himself, aiming the cannon himself, firing it himself. So plunging is a very, very significant term. It's a great, great analogy, using the ocean, for example, and a great metaphor, if you will, for what is required. So yes, plunge in as soon as you possibly can. Even Swami Vivekananda was reluctant, see. He said, but if I dip my tongue into the nectar, will that not be enough? Ramakrishna laughs at him. Well, why not plunge in? You're afraid that you'll lose your identity. But this is your identity. When you swim, then you realize your identity, actually. It's one inhibiting thing. And this is called personality or ego, same thing. Well, feel free to ask any other question also.
I was in Heathrow Airport and I was gonna catch the train back to come back to Chesham, and when I looked at my left, I saw there was a man standing, and he was getting on the train with me. And as I saw him, I was seeing Swami Vivekananda there. Oh my God. It's like if it was Swami Vivekananda in the century, and I kept looking at him and my eyes couldn't stop staring at him. He was just so alike. He was like what we would call a twin. And I kept, oh my God, I kept looking at him, and at some point he sat in front of me, and my mind, oh my God, the only thing that was repeating in my head was glory unto thee, and my head was just looking at his feet, and I couldn't lift my head. I could just close my eyes or open my eyes and stare at his face, and he looked so alike. He was like I had the Swami in front of me, and I felt so, oh my God, such a personality. How would it be if it was there in that train with me to London? And my eyes started to get into tears of such great person, someone that achieved so much. And it was such a feeling. And still of the day of today, when I see that in front of me, is so meaningful. And I kept thinking I need to share it with Swami, because although for me it's been more like from a Krishna and Holy Mother, and although I've got Swami very present and he occupies the same place, having that experience was just like what it was like seeing something, first of all, that you can't explain, but I can't explain Swami. And I keep thinking I need to share it with Swami, because I can't find words for what I say gained from that experience or experimented.
So we were talking about divine grace flowing, and this could be an example of such a thing. And of course, we shouldn't be surprised. And if these phenomena that appear before us have some use, then the use really would be that it urges us more and more to intensify spiritual practice so that the whole thing can be revealed more and more. You see, we shouldn't be surprised if we are convinced that there's only one mind called cosmic mind, and that's it. So cosmic mind is there, appearing in different forms. And if we have thought about Vivekananda, it's no surprise that Vivekananda should appear before us. Or if we think of some other thing. It's no surprise that it should appear before us. But this is all God's grace, divine grace, manifesting for us individually in order to motivate us toward nobler heights. So blessed are you.
Thank you, Swami.
All right, good. Well, is there anything else? If there's nothing else, we'll close off. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Thanks.
Thank you, Swami.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Swami.
Swami.
Thank you, Swami.